my name is Miranda Fernandez-Berto, and this is my presentation on Death of a Salesman by Arthur Millers. So, Death of a Salesman was set around World War II by Arthur Millers. Starts with a flute playing, and Will, a salesman past the age of 60, who longs for nature and its beauty, returns home from extremely tired with a lack of sales done, and he had almost crashed his car multiple times on the way back home. You see, mental confusion, such as flashbacks, are a new norm for him, so he's been going through this while driving, during sales. It's been having it's a problem. Linda, who has always been supporting him, tries to persuade him to ask his boss to work in New York City where they live, so he doesn't have to be traveling all the time, hence his exhaustion. However, their grown sons, Biff, a well-built but not so successful man, who longs to work on a farm away from New York City, and Happy, a womanizing strong man who picks up most of his bad traits from their father, Willie, are temporarily staying at home with their parents. Biff is unsure about his career path, and Happy wants to be successful how his father aims to be, but both of them are described as lost. As the boys are talking together in their room, Willie, who is downstairs at the time, is having multiple flashbacks to better times where the boys were younger and they're playing football, doing things they enjoyed, etc. He wasn't traveling so much. And he was also thinking about his hopes for the future, but is haunted by an affair that he had had during a business trip long ago with someone known as the Woman, who is usually found throughout the play laughing in the background as he is having these flashbacks. Flashing back to the present, Willie sees his wife, Linda, mending some stockings, which were very similar to some that he had given to the woman. Seeing this, he becomes haunted by that memory, and he becomes outraged and demands her to stop. The stockings in this instance of the play have several reappearances throughout the play, and generally represents Will's betrayal and deception, and his guilt toward his wife, as well as the central rift between himself and Biff, since they do not agree with each other much. Will also finds himself haunted by the successes of his now deceased brother, Ben, who had gotten rich in a diamond mine by 21 in Africa when he had moved over there at around age 19. Ben had at some point asked Will to go with him to Alaska. However, the repetition of distant lands such as Alaska and him actually moving to Africa represent the material successes that Will wished he had gotten, such as being rich and having all these things. Will also wanted these things in New York City, but he also wanted freedom, which he was restricted from because of that man-made environment that he had lived in New York City and within his job. Later on, Linda explains Will's deterioration to Biff and Happy, and how Will was borrowing money from Charlie, and he had even attempted suicide with a pipe thing that they have in the basement. She had then placed it on the boys to fix their relationship with their father, which was already deteriorating itself, and had even claimed that his life was in their hands. After the family had begun talking about Biff's future, since he was very uncertain about his career path and his plans, they had become more hopeful in reaching out to an old employer named Bill Oliver in hopes that he would provide financial backing into opening a sports store for Happy and Biff to work with each other. Shortly after, Will had decided that he was going to ask his boss for a salary job in New York City so he wouldn't have to travel so much, and Will and Biff were both going to meet with their bosses the next day. Both of the meetings ended up going very poorly, and the former employer, Bill Oliver, had refused to even see Biff, and Will had ended up getting fired since he was doing so poorly with his sales. All the men had met in a restaurant afterwards to celebrate, but it was no happy occasion, with Biff and Will arguing at some point at the restaurant, and the boys had abandoned their father, Willie, and he began to be haunted by his memories of Biff discovering his affair when they had gone to Boston together. Earlier on in the story in the past, they had begged their father to go on a trip with them at some point, and during this trip, Biff had discovered the affair that their father was having, which caused some disillusionments with him. That Boston trip is also around the time that Happy had claimed that Biff had changed, because this was around the time that Biff had discovered about the affair. Of course, when Linda had found out they had abandoned their father at the restaurant, as per usual, she had defended Willie and was outraged with Biff and Happy for leaving their father at the restaurant alone. Back at home, however, Willie had remained confused, and he had even attempted to plant some seeds that he had bought earlier on in the story in their backyard, even though it had proved to get no sunlight and not to have any life growing in it. The seeds in this context of the story had represented Will's longing for nature, as well as his desperate attempts to be successful in the past and in the present, as well as his failure as a father figure, and which reflects into his failure of creating a garden. They represent each other, and they were one and the same. Willie then had imagined his deceased brother Ben telling him about the $20,000 life insurance policy that he had had. Later on, Willie and Biff had a final confrontation in which Biff had claimed that he was going to leave the family for good. With all that had just happened, all the confusion, all the talks that he had imagined having with Ben, Will had decided to go with what he was going to do. So he decided that after everyone had gone to bed, he was going to get in the car and speed away, with the second act of the play ending with the family and Charlie gathered around his grave. At this point in the play, there is a requiem, and the family and Charlie were the only ones at the funeral and reflecting on Will's life. Linda had even wondered why they were the only ones there, after asking where all the people he had known had been, and they had not been there. Biff had been the only character that actually changed throughout the play in a large way, and developed different feelings, claiming that their father had the wrong dreams. But Happy had refuted that, claiming that he was going to follow his father's footsteps and be the #1 man that his father wanted to be. Linda then remains the last one on the stage at the funeral, wondering why Willie would do such a thing, especially since they had just paid off their house and they were free and clear of debt. Ironically, Willie's suicide was the only way that he was able to provide financial backing for his family. By the end of the play, it ends with the same flute from the beginning playing out, representing Willie's nostalgia throughout the play and longing for family connection. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.